From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello, and welcome to this post-election, post-mortem edition of Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. So, the midterms have come and gone. The red wave never materialized. What happened? Did Republicans overpromise? Did Democrats overdeliver? Well, that we'll find out with our panel, Republican Chris Mitchem, Democrat Kip Tew, and Libertarian Mark Rutherford. Chris, we'll start with you, my friend. First of all, welcome to our Indiana Issues family. Always good to have you here, my friend. What happened on Tuesday? What happened to the red wave?
Well, thank you for having me, Abdul. If I'm a Republican, nationwide, particularly Indiana's a little bit of a different story, but nationwide, I'm certainly upset by what I saw on Tuesday evening. And I think anybody that tells you otherwise would kind of be kidding you. I think from their perspective, you can consider it a win when it comes to most likely taking the House. But even the fact that I'm saying most likely tells you just how the evening went, right? I mean, on an ideal night, even on a good night, you would think we have a larger majority in the House and we maybe even take the Senate. So I think there are a couple silver linings for the Republicans, however, going forward. I think one is we saw a formula that worked. I think it was a bad night for former President Trump when it comes to a lot of his candidates that he endorsed and he supported. So I think you saw that, the American people are kind of tired of all of the January 6th, the election 2020 denying, all the things that kind of propelled a lot of these people into popularity. People are tired of it. And the second one is, I don't think this was a big enough result against Democrats to have them change. I think they're going to continue doing the same policies that have kind of harmed a lot of Americans and seen a lot of the issues that you see going on today. So if there's any silver lining between those two, I think you can have those going forward, but it wasn't a good night for Republicans.
Kip, your thoughts. What happened to the red wave? It just didn't materialize, more like a red ripple.
I'm not sure it was a red ripple even. Abdul, appreciate being on, appreciate the time. I agree with most of what was just said, except for the fact that, except for the criticism of Democratic policies. I think if you look at it, Democrats actually overperformed in states where abortion was in peril. If voters had the sense that abortion rights are going to be taken away, you saw particularly Democrats overperforming. And I think that that is a harbinger of things to come as states continue to move along that path. And I think Indiana, I'm not sure that the message was as clear here because it was stayed by the court system, what the Republicans did in the legislature. So that battle may be yet to come in the state of Indiana. I would also say that I completely agree with the fact that it was a really bad night for former President Donald Trump. And that's a good thing for the United States of America to have that guy in our rearview mirror.
Mark, let's get your thoughts. Red wave, red ripple, blue wave, blue ripple. What do you think happened Tuesday?
Well, one thing that I think I saw on there that we across the nation had a pretty good third party or independent vote compared to other years. I think people are looking for other things out there and other alternatives. And I think that's a good thing. I always have not been pleased with having only two choices. I like to go to the grocery store and have 5 or 6 choices of coffee and make the one that fits me the best. So I think that's very positive that happened Tuesday night. I saw a lot more of that then. And I see some real things moving strongly and having more alternatives to vote for, especially when times are the way they are now. And people are very, very, very seem to be one side or the other or looking for something else. And that always makes for better discussion in the long term.
Chris, one of the other things I noticed, too, is it looks like we will likely have divided government. It looks like Republicans will likely keep the House as we record this conversation. It looks like Democrats will more likely keep the Senate. What do you see happening with divided government? Will we actually get things done in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, regarding your question on if you're happy, I think it depends on who you ask. Obviously, again, Republicans taking the House, they're going to claim that to be a victory, and they can at least be a hurdle into some of what Joe Biden and his administration wants to do. And obviously, if you talk to Democrats, and I genuinely think a lot of Americans, it's a little discouraging, know that Congress is going to be probably moving even slower than it usually And it usually is now that you have, two separate parties holding these different controls of houses. So I think it's a good from a standpoint that, it might cause Joe Biden and some of his Democrat allies to compromise a bit more in order to pass some things. But then also I can see it absolutely being an annoyance to wanting to see things get done in Congress.
Kip, your thoughts on what possibly looks like divided government?
Well, I think it's pretty likely, not entirely decided yet as we tape this show. But a couple of comments with respect to that. Number one, if it's a 2 or 3 or 5 seat majority for the Republicans, I think their own caucus may be ungovernable or be led by the Marjorie Taylor Greens, which won't be good for the Republican Party. They need to move on from the crazy people putting pressure on them and being able to exert their pressure. The other interesting thing, though, is if it is a Republican majority, we have Jim Banks here from Indiana, who is in a fight right now to be majority whip. I know he's whipping votes to try to get that job. If he gets that job and he calms down from being a Trumper, then it could be beneficial to the state of Indiana to have congressman from Indiana in that high level of a position. But I'd like to see him, if he gets that job, to be more rational than he has been and less of a Trump thumper.
Mark, let me ask you. Obviously, the 22 midterms. Sometimes people try to look past the 22 midterms to look at 2024. What do you think this means for the 2024 election, or does it mean anything?
I don't know if it means anything, Abdul. Because a lot of things weren't decided. It's very, very split right now, especially among the national politics of the Republicans and Democrats. And we're even seeing the fights in the leadership. We're seeing some behind the scenes in the Democrats. We're seeing more openly the fights in the Republican Party in Congress for the leadership. So I'm not going to predict anything of this other than we've got another 2 years to try to sort things out and decide what people want, what we'll do, and what's important and what's ethical.
Chris, your thoughts on what this means for 2024, particularly the presidential election, because you got talking about Donald Trump may announce he's going to be running again. Also, you got Ron DeSantis, who won a solid victory down in Florida. You got other possible candidates out there, too.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think this had more to do with the Republican leadership going forward than anything when it comes to 2024 election. I think you saw the Trump support give a lot of these candidates the boost that they needed in the primaries. But when you come to the general election, again, it goes back to, I think people are just kind of tired of hearing about these kind of boisterous different politicians talking about things that are either have ever been proven wrong or are just kind of not really helping everyday Americans. So I think at the top of the Republican ticket is what you saw the most. I think before Tuesday evening, most would say it's Trump's party. He's the leader. He's going to be the guy. After Tuesday and the Ron DeSantis performance you saw in Florida, I think there's going to be a real discussion going forward on kind of how the Republican Party wants to go forward. And if it's going to be away from Trump, I think there might be a bit of a fight on our hands.
Okay, before we move on to the next topic, what are your thoughts? But do the 22 midterms, or did the 22 midterms, or will they have any impact on 2024? Yeah,
I think there's each prior election always has some impact on the next election. So I think in this case, that's definitely true. I agree with the analysis that Ron DeSantis doing so well in Florida gives him a leg up on everybody else who wants to run against Trump. I know I'm in a very small minority in this, but I think this actually helped former Vice President Mike Pence because it may come down to a head-to-head DeSantis versus Trump, and there may be a lane for Mike Pence in the Republican primary come 2 years from now. It kind of depends on whether Youngkin gets in and whether some of the other people that are talking about getting in get in or not. But I don't think Donald Trump's going away, and I don't think he's going to just let Ron DeSantis have this nomination. I think it's going to be a bare knuckle fight, and I think we saw that earlier today with some of the things Trump has said, and so he is incapable, of course, of going off stage left. So he'll have to be dragged by a hook, and it'll be interesting to see how that occurs. On our side, the one thing I would say, I know that the polls show that President Biden isn't as popular as he should be going into re-election, and lots of folks say because of his age, maybe it's time for Democrats to turn the page. I will say that he's being underestimated. He just went through a midterm where his party did better than any out of party or in power party done first term for a president since George W. Bush. And that was a sort of special circumstance with regard to 9/11, of course. But everybody loses seats, multiple dozens, usually in the 50s to 40s in Congress. And that did not happen. In fact, it may end up being very close to a tie. And we're probably going to hold the Senate. I'm not going to say we are yet. We have a special election, as you know, down in Georgia that could decide it. We don't know where Nevada is. I think Arizona looks pretty good, but that's still up in the air. But the point, in fact, is everybody has underestimated Joe Biden, and he's been one of the most consequential presidents in his first 2 years in office of any president I've ever known.
You're watching Indiana Issues, the public affairs program, brought to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. Our guests on the program today are Democrat Kip Tew, Republican Chris Mitchem, and Libertarian Mark Rutherford. I did want to change gears, talk about the U.S. Senate race here in Indiana. Hoosiers returned U.S. Senator Todd Young by overwhelming margins. Jake, we get the graphic up here. He beat Hyman Mayor Tom McDermott. As you can see there, 59 to 38. James Siniak, 3.5%. Young promoted the CHIPS Act, which he said would help the U.S. and its tech industry deal with China. McDermott made abortion rights a priority. Chris, let me start with you. What does this say about Todd Young's win?
I mean, quite the win for Senator Young. I think even the most optimistic Republican told you, we could win by, high single digits, 10, 11%. The fact that we're looking at, close to or over a 20-point victory is great. And I think, again, it's the blueprint that you saw a lot of Republicans use around the country. He stayed above the fray when it comes to a lot of these different issues and really focused on not only working across the aisle, which I think is refreshing and I think a lot of people want to see, but he also literally boasted something that he worked on, that he accomplished in the CHIPS Act, that he had a significant say in, that actually benefited Indiana. I mean, you're talking about over $1 billion investment in 700 jobs in an area where people are still talking about COVID and the dread. If you can legitimately look at people in the face and say, I was a big part of something that brought over $1 billion to 700 jobs, and I had to work across the aisle to do it, I think that is the biggest win any issue you can have these days, is working across the aisle and actually getting things done that's going to benefit Hoosiers.
Kip, your thoughts? Is Indiana just so much of a Republican state that Democrats can't win statewide, or was Tom McDermott's situation different?
Well, it's been a while since we won. It's been a decade since we won statewide, so I don't think it's outside the realm to say that it's a pretty Republican state. I don't think Democrats have figured out what the formula is. It clearly wasn't successful with McDermott. He struggled to raise enough money to get on the air and have a message, and that always is going to hurt you. I got to say, I was surprised at the margin. However, I thought there were Trumpers who were upset with Todd Young, but it certainly doesn't seem as though that was the case at all. It looked like a pretty big straight party vote for Republicans this year. And that also bled over into the Diego Morales victory in the Secretary of State's race. Destiny Wells, I thought, ran as good a campaign as you could ask a Democrat to run in a down ballot race. And the margin wasn't, she did much better than Tom McDermott, but it clearly wasn't even close to being enough to be successful. So we Democrats have some soul searching. We got to really figure out how we move forward as a party here in this state. And hopefully we're going to have those conversations. I don't think it's a lost cause, but we're in a pretty big uphill battle.
Mark, let me ask you, James Siniak only got about 3-4% of the vote. It was also his first time running as a candidate, running for the U.S. Senate. Did the Libertarians pick the right candidate, James Siniak, or should they maybe pick someone who had maybe run at least statewide before?
Well, my preference is to have somebody with more experience, but on James' behalf, he really stepped up into it as a young man. He's very, very impressive. And what he does is with his work, dealing with children with behavioral problems is just amazing. His future is extremely, extremely bright. But running for Senate as a Libertarian is a tough one, because you know that the Republican's going to have plenty of money. The Democrats going to have some problem raising money to compete with the Republican, as McDermott did. And we're just not to the point yet where we're going to get the money for a statewide race like U.S. Senate. So I'm very impressed with what he did, and he worked hard. He did what needed to be done, but it was a race where we were outgunned, and that's all there is to it.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim. We're going to take a break with our guests. When we come back, we'll take a look at the Secretary of State's race and also the Mayor County Prosecutor's race, and also ask our panel for their prognostications and predictions. You're watching Indiana Issues, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. I'm Abdul-Hakim. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. We're talking about the midterm elections, so doing a post-election post-mortem. Our guests on the program today are Republican Chris Mitchem, Democrat Kip Tew, and Libertarian Mark Rutherford. Gentlemen, I want to talk about the Secretary of State's race. I would say possibly the most interesting race Indiana has seen in quite a while. Despite numerous controversies, Diego Morales beat Democrat Destiny Wells and Libertarian Jeff Moore. As you can see there on the screen, Diego Morales 54%, Destiny Wells 40%, and Jeff Moore just under 6%. However, in spite of the Republican victory, Destiny Wells only lost by 4 points in Hamilton County. So, Kip, we'll start with you. Is Indiana just so Republican and so many people voted straight ticket that that's what carried Diego Morales over the threshold?
I think part of the problem was, as I kind of described in the earlier segment, is we have some difficulty in raising enough money to get the message out. And the other thing I would say is that I don't think most voters in the state of Indiana knew the revelations that came out the last week of the campaign, where Diego apparently voted in a county he didn't live in. And so I think that that's a problem going forward, and it's unfortunate that it didn't come out until the week before the campaign ended. We've seen this before. It's very similar and kind of bizarrely similar to the Charlie White situation when he was Secretary of State. He at least voted from his ex-wife's basement. It seemed like it was more legit that he might have lived with his ex-wife while they're going through the divorce. Diego said he lived out in Hendricks County for purposes of running for Congress in the 4th District, but he kept his homestead credit inside Indianapolis. So he's got something to answer for there. And I think that it concerns Republicans as well as Democrats that we have a person who is sitting in the office that oversees elections may have committed election fraud himself. But the issue here is that you asked about, of course, is the effect on the election, and I just think part of the problem here for Democrats is having the funds, the resources to get a message out. Diego Morales was probably the most flawed candidate for statewide office that I can recall. Based upon all the accusations that came out, based upon the fact that he was let go from the office twice. And I think he's going to be a problem for the party, Republican Party going forward. I think maybe you reported or somebody else reported this week that they're trying to get some adult supervision for him in the office so that he doesn't mess it up as the head of the office. I think that's a smart move on their part, but I'm not sure he's going to take to adult supervision. We'll just have to wait and see.
Chris, your thoughts on the Diego Morales, Destiny Scott Wells, Jeff Moore race?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to all the controversy surrounding Diego, the most he got out of it is a slap of the wrist. I mean, he finished slightly below where, Tara Klutz and Dan Elliott finished in the auditor and the treasurer race, respectively. I think he finished about 6 percentage points behind him. So I guess the 6 percentage points is kind of the controversy range, right? But I kind of like what Kip mentioned last segment about the formula that the Democrats are looking for, right? And if I'm the Indiana Democrat Party, I'm kind of not necessarily panicking, but I'm really starting to reevaluate, because you had a flawed candidate in Diego Morales. Nobody's going to decipher that or battle against that. And then I thought you had an amazing candidate in Destiny Wells, an attorney, an Army veteran, a Hoosier, who's had her roots here. And I don't really know if you can really have a better combination of that and still not even get to within single digits of a race. I don't know necessarily what their formula was. I know from a lot of what I saw, it was a lot of Diego bad, and that's it. I couldn't really tell you any really main initiative that Destiny or the Indiana Democratic Party tried to push to say this is why you should support our candidate, and maybe not so much the other one. So like I said, a little slap on the wrist, I think, for the controversies, but I agree with Kip when it comes to his leadership team around him. It's going to be important to see what that looks like, and hopefully he supports himself with people that probably have more experience than him, so he continue to serve Hoosiers. And nobody wants to see him do poorly. I think everybody can say that confidently, but we want to see that office ran effectively and helping out the needs of especially Hoosier small businesses.
Mark, why didn't James Siniak do better?
You mean Jeff Moore?
Jeff Moore. I'm sorry.
I think he did quite fine. First of all, it takes a while to build a party, especially when you have two extremely well-established parties who, they may not like us sometimes and not like us around, and we have to fight really hard. It's also hard to get people to give money. They're used to giving Democrats and Republicans, so it takes longer for us to develop and find the funds to do what we need to do. What I saw in this race, Jeff Moore, first of all, was one of our best candidates ever. And Destiny Wells, I got to give her credit. I thought she was really good, one of the best Democrats that I've seen statewide for a very long time. But it is a Republican state, and I wonder if Destiny would have done a little bit better running a little closer to the center. Maybe a little bit too much away from that on the social issues, when the Secretary of State isn't a social issues, it's an administrative position. But that's hindsight on that. You have to make your bed and do what you need to do to do what you need to do. I'm very disappointed that I didn't see a lot of Democrats from outside Indiana that have supported other good candidates, not supporting their Democrat candidate here. They either weren't paying attention to what was going on with the Republican candidate and all the allegations that are out there about Diego Morales. And that may have been a lost opportunity, because a lot of the problem is people just didn't know what was out there to evaluate it. It also shows you about straight ticket voting. Makes it, we're one of, I think, 6 states that still have it. Every other state has done away with it. It's just too easy for people not to think and just do straight ticket. When I'll admit it, I'm a libertarian. We don't have candidates for every office. And sometimes I vote for a Democrat or Republican, depending on who I think will do the best job in those offices. I just do straight ticket. I don't have any bit of a say in those other offices. So, but the thing to notice about Moore was that where he had the money, and we have to put all our resources in the Secretary of State because it's ballot access, to keep our ballot access, make it easy enough for us to get on there instead of the horrible petition requirements for those who don't have ballot access. We have to put our money and time into it. Central Indiana, we got 7 to 11% of the vote in the counties around Indianapolis and much farther out there. Our problem, if you look at the voting, was the northern tier of counties, far north along the border and all along the Ohio River. Our vote totals were not anywhere near Central Indiana, and that dragged us down.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Well, speaking of straight ticket voting, that's also what helped Ryan Mears, a Marion County prosecutor, win his first election race against Republican Cindy Carrasco. Mears winning 60-40 and some change. Well, we'll see on the screen there, 59-40 on the screen. Carrasco ran on crime and accountability. Mears ran on the root causes of crime as well as cracking down on violent offenders. Kip, let me start with you. Your thoughts on the prosecutor's race? Any surprises there?
I was pleasantly surprised at the margin. I will say that. I thought it was going to be a closer race. It ended up not being very close. Look, Ryan did two things that I think were critical to his victory. First thing is he decided he was not going to prosecute people with low-level marijuana possession, and I think that really helped him in the city. And the second thing he did was say he was not going to prosecute people who doctors or patients who get reproductive health services. And I think both of those things combined were enough for him to win in a county that cares about both those things. And you and I agree on the fact that we should legalize marijuana in the state of Indiana. It's silly that we haven't. Two more states were added to the ledger for legalization, and we're falling further behind in that case. And it was a very smart move by Ryan Mears. Cindy, by all accounts, did what she should do as a candidate. She tried to highlight what she thought were the negative sides of Ryan Mears. I don't think she ran a bad campaign, but I think Ryan outflanked her by taking on the issues that he did. And, we Democrats, at least inside Marion County, have now kind of the same advantage that Republicans have statewide. It's going to be harder and harder for Republicans to compete inside Marion County. It's now becoming clearer and clearer that it is a pretty blue county.
Chris, your thoughts on the prosecutor's race? Was there anything else Cindy could have done differently to maybe either close that gap or possibly win?
That's the thing. I don't think so. I think Kip made a good point when it comes to Cindy ran a fantastic campaign. I mean, what Mark said earlier about, Destiny maybe being not center enough or focusing too much on the social issues. Destiny did that. Cindy did exactly that. I think on her your yard signs, on her website, on all her campaign material, you don't really even see the word Republican one time. She focused on what really matters, which is this high crime in Marion County. And I personally live in downtown Indianapolis, and I can tell you that Cindy's ground game, even the organization, was amazing. I saw far more Cindy signs than I did Ryan Mears signs around my neighborhood and downtown. I know she was, getting plugged in on the east side, attending, everything you want a candidate to do. And she was a great candidate to do it, a minority. I know that would appeal to, maybe some of our Democrat colleagues as well. So the fact that, and I think Republicans even would have taken, a 1 point loss, a 2 point loss. But the fact that we're up at the 19, the 18 range, that one hurts. I think not only if you're a Republican in Marion County, you have to be discouraged by that. But if you're even a state, Republican and wanting to maybe try to chip into Marion County to support your supermajorities in both the House and the Senate, or, for future, congressional races, I think this really showed that even with an amazing, incredible candidate who did the work like Cindy, Marion County is going to have to require a whole lot of work to begin to turn that tide.
Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was surprised at the margin there. I thought that the crime issues, et cetera, would have diminished Mears' total, although I always expected Mears to win, because I think there's prosecutorial discretion. That's built into our law, into Indiana law, and there's a reason for it. If you go out there, you could prosecute thousands of people. You decide which are the most important things for your county. And it gives the county some local control, which they like. They're always upset at the General Assembly, the counties are. But that's one thing where they do have some control, is what crimes do we prosecute that bother us the most in this county? And I think that rang a favorable bell to the citizens of Marion County. So I don't think that hurt him one bit. Cindy, I thought, ran a very, very good campaign. But it strikes to me what I've observed for a while now, and that is the structural weakness of the Marion County GOP. Needs to get better structurally. I remember a time not that long ago where the Democrat Party in Marion County was getting vote totals that didn't really reflect what their support should be. And they got super organized, and now look at where they're at. So now they had some population changes, of course. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But part of it was they got super organized and did a good job. It was painful at times for them, I'm sure, but it got done. And the Republicans should be doing better than this, in my opinion, in Marion County, and they're not.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazi, editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Now we come to the end of our program. We ask our panel to do their predictions and prognostications, to look in their crystal balls and see what they can find out through the political ether. Chris, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Abdul. And I mentioned it before, but I think in the crystal ball, you're going to see Republicans. I mean, even in Indiana, I think with Todd Young winning by such a wide margin, but certainly nationally, you're going to start to see the formula that worked. You know, I think the age of Trump is slowly starting to fade away, and not saying you have to, you know, be reserved in what you believe and, you know, be your stereotypical politician who's, you know, fairly reserved, because I think Ron DeSantis shows that you don't have to do that, but he focused on good governance and he focused on what people actually care about. And that saw waves of support for him in Florida. So I think going forward, Indiana, even though obviously times are good here, certainly for us, but even nationally, you're going to start to see Republicans, I think, begin to fade away from that mean tweet era of politics, I'll call it, and really start again going more towards being quote unquote normal. I think the people that focused on inflation and crime and the policies of the Biden administration, I'm looking at, you know, the Governor Kemps and the Governor DeWines of the world, who maybe weren't necessarily that favorable with Donald Trump, but they far outperformed the people that did. And I think that's going to be the example going forward as Republicans continue to serve and address what people care about most.
Kip, what do you see in the political ether, my friend?
Well, I really like what Chris said. Hope it comes true from his lips to God's ears, I guess. But because we need a Republican Party that's responsible, we don't need a Trump party. The Trump party has been nothing but divisive for the United States of America, and it has not allowed people to focus on what the important issues of the day are. It's just been a sideshow, freak show, really, for a number of years. So I hope he's right about that. For me, prognostication, I'm going to do an easy one. I do think the Democrats will hold the United States Senate, and we will have 5-seat majority for the Republicans in the House in Congress, and we will have divided government at the federal level. We'll have a lot of investigations of Hunter Biden by the right-wing squad, if you will, in DC, and not a lot will get accomplished, and that's an unfortunate thing at the national level, but it will help Democrats in the end because it will, again, highlight the ridiculousness of some of the people that are in power on the Republican side.
Mark, I'll give you the last word.
Well, watch out for the Libertarians in the municipal local elections next year. This year, we have to run hard in Secretary of State and put our resources in there because we need the ballot access to be able to get our candidates and lots of candidates on the ballot in 2023. And I'll give you an example of what happened this year. There is a local race in Lawrence County for a township board. Top 3 get elected. Our candidate right now sits at number 4 by 1 vote with 2 votes, waiting for that 10 days for voters to come in on absentee ballots to possibly cure procedural defects that they can cure under the law. And so we don't know whether we've won that 3rd spot or not, but we can compete at that level. We're very well organized and getting better organized across the state in many counties on that level. So watch out for us in 2023. We're going to surprise some people with some victories in a lot of local elections.
All right. Well, our guests on the program today have been Republican Chris Mitchem, Democrat Kip Tew, Libertarian Mark Rutherford. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazi. From all of us here at the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, thank you for joining us. We'll be back again soon, and we appreciate you watching Indiana Issues.